Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Theology Thursday here on Shields and Arrows. We're going to be spending the time answering your theology questions today, and we have plenty of time to answer questions because right now we don't have a whole lot. We are only going live on YouTube right now. Nathan's still working on trying to get Worshify up and running, so we're just going live to YouTube right now. And let's see here, a few announcements before we jump into things. We did have our Bible study that was last night. Let's see if I can get it pulled up for you to where you can see that. And so we had a fun time studying Abraham, session number 30, in which we looked at Romans chapter 4, not entirely or not all of Romans chapter 4. We got down to verse 12. And so if you get the opportunity to look at Romans chapter 4, a very challenging chapter for a lot of people. I think it's where a lot of people get confused, maybe where some of this anti-dispensational doctrine comes, because, hey, Abraham was justified by faith, and David was forgiven, or at least David describes a man who was forgiven by God, his sins not imputed against him. So clearly this means that the law was never actually meant to be kept by Israel, and it's always been by grace through faith, not of works, lest anyone should boast. And it just really creates a problem for theology, because then we overlook very important matters such as the mystery that is revealed and understanding Jesus' teaching. What was his ministry about when he was on earth? What did he mean by calling men to repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand? So hopefully you are going to be able to find that study on Romans chapter 4 to be valuable. We probably got, maybe 4 or 5 more sessions left on studying Abraham. I'm not quite sure how many more times Abraham appears in the Bible after Romans chapter 4. I know we're going to spend some time in Galatians on Abraham, but we may also have a little bit to cover in, not Revelation. Revelation doesn't mention Abraham, but we do have matters of Abraham in Hebrews, decent amount in Hebrews, as a matter of fact. So we may have a few more sessions on Abraham than that. Certainly we've got Abraham and James. So instead of 3 or 4, maybe 6 to 8 or so more sessions on studying Abraham. It'll be very thorough. At least that is our goal, to be very thorough. And so let's see here. Let's get into some theology discussion today. And let's see, looking up here for some questions. I know I had a few sent in, at least 1 or 2 sent in by message. And here we go. Here is the main question that I have right now. So today could be a short day, but is abortion ever justified? Is abortion ever justified? So I'm going to do my best to find scripture here, and I suppose that we can look at a few passages that will give us an idea of how God views the ending of human life, okay? So let's look at Romans 1:29. Romans 1:29, I think, is a really good verse to consider that just speaks to the general statement on evil and wickedness that mankind engages in. And so even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventor of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful. who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. And so you have this matter right here, okay? Murder included in that. So murder, we would say, if we think about the law that was given to Israel, they were given the command, thou shalt not kill. And then God immediately turns around and commands Israel to, well, let's just even look at this just to understand the context here. So if we go to Exodus chapter 20, verse 1, this is the Ten Commandments that are given here. Exodus 20:13, thou shalt not kill. And yet, God commands them not to kill. However, you have this issue, I believe is it in chapter 24 of Exodus? The man who is gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. Is that right? Is it Exodus chapter 6? It might be chapter 25. And if I can't find it pretty soon, I will stop worrying about it here. But the point is that the command to not kill has context. It excludes the capital punishment aspect. There is a justified case in which a man can be put to death for violating the law. And I know it's in here. I don't know which verse or which chapter it is, but I tell you that it is there. I just can't locate it at the moment. But there is the requirement of justice carried out under the law for capital punishment. Here you go. It was Numbers chapter 15, verse 36. Because you have the repeat given of the commandments. And then here in Numbers chapter 15, a man was gathering sticks on the Sabbath day and he was stoned. So that does not violate the... Chandler says, is murdering babies ever right? Just reward the question. Well, I'm trying to approach this from a very analytical way because the person, Chandler, I try to approach the question with the person that is asking the question in mind. And this is a very analytical person. And so if I don't give a biblical case here, an analytical, biblical, logical reason, then I'm not going to persuade the individual, all right? So that's why I'm approaching it this way. So with that, there are times when killing is justified in the case of capital law or capital punishment under the law. But there's also times in which Israel is told to go and slay these people, right? Go and defeat the city of Jericho or the battle of Ai, right? There's times when God commands them and tells them to go to war. And those are times in which killing is justified. And maybe you could argue that in Exodus chapter 20, verse 13, the better interpretation, which I think that there's no reason to correct the King James, by no means. Please don't think that I'm saying that. But there are some that argue that you could take this instead of killing as being murder, thou shalt not murder rather than thou shalt not kill, depending on the context there. And so you can make that argument. I think that probably kill is a more accurate word. And killing is, in the context of how it's being used in the law, is an unjustified killing. So now the question is abortion, and I'm looking at the way the question is worded here. The question is worded as, is abortion ever justified? So let's now that we have determined, is there ever a time to justify killing someone? The answer would be yes, under the circumstances of capital punishment, under the circumstances of being commanded to go and defeat a people, right? Defeat them in battle. Now, let's define the parameters of what we would refer to as an abortion, okay? The abortion would be the ending of an unborn person. Okay, it would be the ending of the life of an unborn person. There are some people, and I'm just trying to work through it, thinking about all the different ways that they would approach this. There are some people who would say that it is not abortion if the baby is not viable. Sometimes there are cases in which a child, and you could almost say that a person begins to develop, but that person does not develop with the organs necessary for survival, okay? So you would have maybe a child that begins developing without a brain, okay? A child that develops without kidneys. I don't know, can a child develop without a heart, lungs even, because up to the point of being in the womb, a baby's not using their lungs. They're getting all their oxygen from their mother. And the argument would go, well, in those cases, that is not a viable human life, right? And I'm trying to get into the nuances here of all this, because I know the person that I'm addressing here would hold to all these different factors, okay? So let's start out with the really easy stuff, and we're going to expose the evil of Democrat policy and their view on abortion. So leaving out those examples for right now, if a child is viable or not, and if there is a child developing that is lacking the necessary functions to live, like a brain or kidneys or lungs or anything like that. But let's just get to a more basic thing. Let's say you have a perfectly viable child. That baby is healthy. There's no defects or anything at all. I think we would all agree that that would be the obvious murder, and you could use the term abortion, of a human life that is in the womb. So therefore, any abortion that is done with a viable baby is not justified, because that really is murder. That's a viable human life, and you are killing that person, that human being in the womb. And what does that do for the Democrat platform? That rules out abortions due to rape, abortions due to incest. Those are often the two that are frequently quoted, right? Well, what about in the case of rape and incest? And they'll use the most extreme examples. They'll always use the example of something like you got a 12-year-old girl, right, who is raped. Are you going to make her carry that child? So they go to the extremes. So with that, here's the thing. They would not pass any law. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't pass any law that would limit abortions to just those scenarios, because they don't actually believe that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare, like it's often quoted. Remember Hillary Clinton? I think she was one of the ones, or maybe it was Bill Clinton, who was famous for that line. But they would not restrict it to that. So now, with that, if we have determined that a human being is not to be unjustifiably killed, not only on the basis of the Old Testament law, but Paul would affirm the evil of murder. That would be wicked in all dispensations. If you think about the commandment when Noah and his sons get off the ark, if a man sheds man's blood, by a man will his blood be shed. I'm roughly quoting there. Then it would not be justified to abort a baby, killing a baby, in the case of rape or incest, because that is the murdering, the unjustified killing of a human life. Now, if we have ruled those out as justified, they're not, right? We've said they're not justified. That covers 90% probably of all the other reasons for abortion. So let's say the mental health of the mother. Everybody who is here probably knows someone or has been pregnant, all right? It's either you are a mother, or you and your wife had a child, or you had a sister, someone you know that was pregnant and delivered a baby. That is a very difficult time, because it is requiring so much of a woman's body to grow a person. It is requiring a change in hormone levels as the woman is preparing to deliver the baby and everything that comes with that. I don't know of any woman who would not say that her mental health was affected by pregnancy. Okay? So if we have already determined that the case of rape and incest are not justified, we have eliminated any other. The mental health of the woman, the financial position of the woman, any other host of reasons, okay? Now, we've eliminated 90% of abortions. In those cases, abortion is never justified. Now, it does really matter how you define the term abortion. Are we going to use the term to any and all pregnancies, even if the baby is not viable? Now, this does come down to a more moral and ethical type discussion. Because we do know, for example, if there is a child that does not have a brain, that child will not be able to live. You have to have a brain in order to live. Now, is that child a person with a soul? They have a body. And if they have a body, is it necessary, if a person is lacking a leg, would we say they're any less of a human being? Because that baby would have its own unique genetic tissue. You could discern between the tissue of the baby and the tissue of the mother. There's going to be a unique genetic code there that is distinct. Where the discussion comes in, and I'm trying to approach this from I know that an emotional appeal is not going to persuade some people, okay? They want to hear a more analytical thought on the matter, all right? So I'm trying to give you an analytical position. Please don't think I'm being cold or not caring here. You've heard me speak many times about the evils of abortion. And I've already gone a long ways to eliminating the vast majority of them and saying that they are unjustified. Now I'm trying to get down into the probably even less than 10%, maybe even less than 1%. I don't know if you can calculate the percentage there. But the question is abortion ever justified? And now we're down into the really more difficult discussions on morals and ethics. let's consider the baby that does not have a brain, or the baby that has developed lacking essential, necessary organs and development stages in order to survive. The reason why the baby is continuing to grow to whatever capacity it can is because it is receiving the nourishment from its mother. And if let's say you have a child who they have received such a significant traumatic damage to their brain, and you could even extend that to their organs, that a child needs to, the only way the child could live is if the child was hooked up to life support. Okay? It's a very difficult discussion here, but I'm trying to really be thorough. If that child, as long as the child is hooked up to life support of its own, it would not be able to continue to grow and develop. Even if you kept it on life support long enough to where it reached a stage it could grow and develop. But the child that is on life support would grow all the same. Okay? That child, assuming that at the very least the brain and the what's the word I'm looking for here? The hormone production is operating as it should, even though nothing else is. The child that is on that hospital bed hooked up to life support will continue to grow, even though the child, the second that the child is disconnected from life support, would not survive, because the heart has failed, or the lungs have failed, or the brain portion that is responsible for telling the heart to beat has failed. I just hope you understand that the scenario I'm trying to present to you here, right? That's a way to look at a child in the womb that has not developed in a way that it, if brought to full term, could live outside the womb. It would need to be on the life support from the mother. That's essentially what it is. The umbilical cord, the womb that the child grows in, is its life support. Now, what's the difference between that baby, and I am calling that baby a baby. I'm not calling it a clump of tissue. I think that baby has a body. I would say that the brain is an organ just as any other. Just because you don't have just because you're missing an organ doesn't mean that you are not a human being. The difference between that baby and a baby that is normal, what's the difference there? The difference is that this baby over here has the capacity, once the baby reaches term or full term and is able to be delivered, that baby can exist outside of the womb. The baby can breathe, the baby can take in oxygen, the baby can feed and process the nourishment that the baby gets, hopefully from the baby's mother. Breast milk is the best thing for a baby. I'm really convinced of that. And so that baby has the ability to grow and develop. That is where, are you defining that as abortion? There would be some that might include that in the broad category of abortion, and if so, there would be some people who I think could still call themselves pro-life, but would maybe agree with your statement that in those very specific scenarios, abortion would be justified. However, I would also say that there are some who would say that is not an abortion. An abortion is the ending of the life of a viable child, viable in the sense that if the child is carried to full term, that child has all the faculties and abilities to be able to grow and be healthy outside of the womb of the child's mother. Now, there are some who are absolutist and say that it would never be justified. So another scenario we haven't explored yet would also be the life of the mother. And here's where people can get really sensitive about this. And I'm just going to be blunt on this. And I know that I haven't been there. And if you haven't been in that situation, then it's really hard for you to say how you would think or how you would feel. But I will say, as a father of triplets, there was a lot of fear and worry about how this may turn out. It never got to a serious point. It never got to the point that Mary's life was at risk. My wife's life was at risk. But as a mother, and mothers here can speak to this, you can testify, your convictions on this matter. But I think most mothers, their position is, I will do anything to save my child's life. I would lay down my life if it meant to save my child. And that's what most mothers say. Now, the difference is, do you really believe that? Or is that just sound nice? Or do you have that opinion only if your child is in your arms, you're holding on to your child, you can see your child, you can play with your child, you can talk to your child like right there face to face? Because the truth is, if you have the mentality, I would lay down my life for my child. Asking a mother, mothers, if you had to, would you donate your heart to save your child? That you would give up your heart beating in your chest to save your child? I know it's an extreme example, and I know this is a very hard thing. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you would say yes, absolutely, and I don't really know of any mother that wouldn't, I don't see it being different that if you are trying to bring a child into the world and that child is in your womb and your health is at risk, that it is that fundamentally different from that child outside of the womb and you doing everything you can to protect your child. These are very hard things, and I'm trying to show you here, I'm not trying to dodge hard questions. Is abortion ever justified? So, justified in the case of rape, incest, and anything else? Absolutely not. Depending on how you define abortion, where I stand personally, I do think that the viability of a child does come into effect. Now, there would be some who would say, well, why don't you, pray that this child has maybe the doctors missed it. Maybe that child really does have whatever necessary development it needs, whether that's an organ or something else. And I would say you should never be quick to make any decision like that. The idea that you can't give your child every chance, every opportunity to just as if you had a child who was on life support, right? They're laying in the hospital bed. You would want to do everything you can, give every chance to let that child live, to see if the child can make a recovery. These are very hard things. The truth is, though, these are in the vast minority of situations that we're talking about here, also in the life of the mother. If you think I'm wrong in my thoughts there concerning the life of the mother in the case of a pregnancy, by all means, you can let me know. But if the child is potentially viable, if the mother is able to deliver or carry the baby as long as she can, and the good news is, with advancement in technology, the point that we're at now, here's the thing. Technology is kind of part of the problem here, because let's just really think about this. There's a really interesting passage in the Bible, and I don't mean to be spending so much time on this, but I think that there's so much, we have created some of our own problems here in all of this, some of the confusion. Exodus 21:22. we are so sheltered from the hard things of life. I think this is one reality that just is true. It just exists. So here's this one. Verse 22 of Exodus 21. If men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay all the judges determine. Now, that would seem that there is this strife between a man and a woman, two men, and the woman somehow gets hurt in the process, and it leads her to delivering early. Her fruit departs from her, yet no mischief follow. I think the only way to take that is that the child is okay. The baby delivers early, but no mischief follows. Child does not die. Verse 23, however, if any mischief follow, then shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. So if you cause that baby to deliver early and that baby's dead, you face the punishment. You face the punishment. These issues and discussions on abortion that exist today do not exist in other places. Okay, they do not exist in other places. So, for one, back in the day, you didn't know how your baby was developing. There was always the possibility that you could deliver a baby that was stillborn. Now, it's still true today, but you have a whole lot better idea of what to expect in today's time because they can keep track of the baby's heartbeat. They can keep track of all of those things in the womb. Back in the day, you would be pregnant and you might deliver early. That baby might be born perfectly healthy. That baby might be born stillborn. That baby could be born missing a leg. That baby could be born missing his brain. You don't know. And then it's a tragedy and it's very sad. But this is the harsh, brutal reality of what life was like. Also, you didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. You just had to wait and see. We have created a lot of these problems now, these dilemmas for ourselves because of our technology. So now we can know, oh, well, the baby doesn't have a brain. The baby doesn't have his kidneys or fill in the blank. In a sense, if you will, I'd be so willing to say that that wasn't God's intentions, perhaps, for how this was to be done. You got pregnant and you delivered the baby and you waited to see. You just waited until the baby was delivered, and then you would know if you had a healthy baby or not. And now we have this issue. Well, what do? Do you get rid of the baby or do you not get rid of the, and then kill the baby, right? If the baby is potentially viable. And nowadays, and let's talk about viable. Babies with Down syndrome and other issues, they're perfectly viable outside the womb. And so that would not be justified at all. Also, due to infertility treatments, whether it's IVF or other things, right, you can get complications in pregnancies. We kind of create our own problems, don't we? Also, probably a lot of the stuff that we're having women take nowadays and expose them to is creating infertility, and we should investigate that some more. But the truth is, nowadays, technology is advancing so much, it almost evens itself out, because if you deliver a baby early, 25 weeks, a 25-week-old baby can survive. That's how good the treatment is now. And mothers can absolutely come back from a lot. I mean, there was a time that a C-section was just the mother would die. And now women can have multiple C-sections delivering babies that way. So I'm going to move on from it, but it's just, there's a lot to it when you start trying to determine the biblical case for killing. Is abortion ever justified? And I would say if you're killing a human life, then you're committing murder, and it's not justified. And I'm going so far as to say, even in the case of a mother, her life potentially being at risk, because if you're a mother, is it not your conviction to do everything you can to save your child's life? That's a very hard position. Maybe you disagree. But I've spent 30 minutes on it now. I'm going to move on to another question, but I hope that you can look at what I've thought about, addressed today, and you feel like I haven't tried to dodge anything and spoke to the whole matter. So is abortion ever justified? Defining abortion as the killing of as a viable baby, it's never justified. Never. And if some would extend abortion to a baby that's not viable, I'm at this time in my life, 30 years old, I'm willing to have a little bit more conversation to that matter. If there's somebody who has a stronger conviction, though, that it never at any time, even if the baby is without a brain, then feel free to let me know your thoughts on that issue, on that matter. But my thoughts are we live in a very soft time. We can just get away from those issues. Back in the day, you didn't know, and you just had to wait and see. And who knows? Doctors have been wrong before. Maybe it's possible that that child could make it. But the only way it can't is if you abort it. So that's something to chew on today. Okay, moving on. Robert has a question here. Question on the Great White Throne Judgment. Revelation chapter 20, verse 15. Doesn't the grammar allow for all present being cast into the lake of fire, yet not conclusively? 10:20 makes it clear it's forever, but does the grammar allow the sparing of some? Yeah, I see what you're asking. That's an interesting question. Okay, so Revelation chapter 20. Verse 20, it says, "And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works." Now, this is the second resurrection. You will remember that in verse 6 here, it says, "Blessed and holy is he," this is the same chapter, "Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. But they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years." And so those that are part of the first resurrection, blessed are they will get to reign with Christ 1,000 years. That would certainly include the saints of the Old Testament, the martyrs, I would say, during the time of the tribulation. And so Robert's question is this second resurrection here, the way you read it, is this all-inclusive? Is everybody going to be cast into the lake of fire? So, "And I saw the dead, small and great," this is at the end of the 1,000 years, "stand before God, and the books were opened." Once again, these are all judged according to their works. That's an interesting statement there. Now, that doesn't mean automatically that just because somebody's judged according to their works does not mean they're going to be cast to the lake of fire, because you can read the instruction to the churches in the tribulation at the beginning of the book of Revelation, which I take to be future churches, and they're absolutely being judged by their works. And if they endure, if their works are perfect before God, they will receive the crown of righteousness. They'll receive the white raiment. They'll receive a stone and a name that, is given unto them. So just because they're judged according to their works doesn't automatically mean they're not entering the kingdom. But the question is, are those here in chapter 20, verses 12 through 15? Is there any chance that some of these enter into, the eternal age, the new heavens and new earth? "And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them." So these people were not a part of the first resurrection, which means either there's two different options for them. They could be people who died before and were not permitted to be resurrected into the kingdom, which would almost, if you have died before the kingdom came and you are either not a part of the body of Christ, seated in the heavenly places, or we could entertain being on the earth during the kingdom. That's an interesting area that I'm still chewing on. But it's not going to be good for you, okay? If you're not a part of that first resurrection, or you haven't been a part of the rapture, you have missed the boat. The only other way that you are a part of this second group here is if we have some sort of scenario, and Robert, feel free to let me know your thoughts on this, is if we have some sort of scenario that you died during the millennial reign, but you did not have eternal life. You were not given a glorified body. And I think there's a good argument there and I think it's probably the way to go. And it may be almost explicit in Scripture that you've got people living on earth in the kingdom with glorified bodies, and then you have other people living on the earth who are not in glorified bodies, who are not immortal, right? That term that you would use. But they died right with God. They died blessing God, praising God, blessing the Jew, saying, take us with you, God is with you. And then it came time for the second resurrection, in which you could be resurrected to enter into the new heavens and earth. I don't know if many people would entertain that possibility. I don't know if I've heard of anybody who holds that position. If you have heard of somebody who articulates that position, let me know. And Robert obviously is presenting that as a possibility here, or at least asking my thoughts if I think it's a possibility. Let's go ahead and read a little bit more here. And so the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. Now, maybe this is a part of God's justice. Let's just say every one of these are cast into the lake of fire here. Maybe it's just a part of God's justice. Every man gets his trial. Every man gets his hearing. He's not just instantly cast into the lake of fire without God giving the proclamation for it. But there is the idea that no, they're being judged. Each man judged according to his works. Verse 14, and death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. That verse 15, I do agree with you, Robert, does seem to suggest, I'm trying to look at how you worded that again, that doesn't the grammar allow for all present being cast into the lake of fire, yet not conclusively? Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you can read, and that's often how we do read it. That's how I've read it before, that everybody present at the second resurrection is cast into the lake of fire. But those who are of the first, let me just stop there. I should have stopped. Those of the second resurrection will all be cast in the lake of fire. But I would agree, though, the way the language is, you can make an argument here that there is the possibility that there's some who are not, and that some have their name in the book of life, and those that don't have their name in the book of life are cast into the lake of fire. And in verse 10, yes, the devil that deceived them cast to the lake of fire, and the beast and the false prophet are tormented day and night forever and ever. So we would if we're going to hold that view, or if you're going to entertain that view, you would just need to have some doctrinal position that accounts for people living and dying during the millennium who die essentially in right standing with God. That would be my thoughts on that. Robert says, and maybe we... Okay, so still on the abortion matter, just reading some comments here. Where I grew up, Missouri, Buthiel, they said if it's a choice between the mother and baby, don't go to a Catholic hospital. Like most in my area, I was birthed at St. Francis in Cape Girardeau. If it's a choice between the mother and baby, don't go to a Catholic hospital. I'm not quite sure of the insinuation there. Is it that they're more willing to save are they more willing to save the baby because they can take the baby in and raise it in the church? Tom says, as Scripture says, life is in the blood. A baby has a heartbeat at 3 weeks. Life is in the blood, and I think that's an important thing to account for, and why I would say there's unique blood there. That is the baby's blood. It is not the mother's blood. So even if a child is missing what we would call the essential organs in development for life to be able to actually live, it's still a person. That is still a human being. And I would say they have a soul. Rick couldn't connect. It took him a while until he removed restricted mode. So I'm on restricted. So we are restricted right now. You got to be on restricted mode. Chandler says, given the vast numbers of babies that are no longer living, I'm surprised the Lord has maybe hasn't enacted some sort of judgment yet. Yeah, sadly, statistically, what is it? The most dangerous place for a black child to be is in their mother's womb, because they are more likely to be aborted than die by abortion than anything else. Okay, moving on to my sister's question here. And once again, before I get into it, please let me know. I never claim to you. I think it's a sign of maybe a little bit of arrogance for especially somebody younger like me to claim they have all of these moral and ethical issues completely ironed out. I'm willing to hear you make your case. If you think that I am wrong in being willing to entertain the conversation about the viability of a baby factoring into the definition of abortion. If you think I'm wrong there, I want to hear your thoughts. And please persuade me if you think that I'm looking at that wrong. If you think that my opinion concerning the life of the mother and my thoughts on that, I do want to hear from you. You can either message me here if you'd rather save it for a private conversation, markdbaze@gmail.com. I don't run from questions. But I also am willing to tell you I'm going to give you my answer, and then I want to hear your thoughts as well. Robert says that's it exactly. The mother has had her chance at life, the baby over the mother in Catholic hospitals. Yeah, and that's maybe a conviction that they have. You could maybe attribute maliciousness to it. It's a moral and ethical issue. Okay, let's get back to my sister's question. Here's my question: Genesis 19. 30 through 38, Lot's daughters get their father drunk so they can deceive him and preserve his lineage. Do you think this is something that was seen as evil by God? So I did we actually covered this passage to some degree. Genesis chapter, 19. And so Lot went up out of Zor and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters were with him, for he feared to dwell in Zor. And he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Let's just stop there for a second. I'm going to take the statement that the daughters make here, that there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. I'm going to take that for what it says. I think that as far as they knew, Lot's daughters believed that they had just witnessed can you say the apocalypse or almost the near distinction of man. As far as they know, the world has been destroyed. The great cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities are gone. What are we to do now? There is no other people. Our mother's been turned to a pillar of salt. It is me, my sister, and my father. There's no man left. No man left for us to marry. There's no way that that man will continue on the earth now. Verse 32, so what are they to do? Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we shall lie with him that we may preserve seed of our father. That's exactly what they do. Lot doesn't know anything about this. He perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And then, of course, they did the same thing the next night. And then they both bear, thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father, and the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab. The same is the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and called his name Ben-Ammi. The same is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. We do know that Lot is referred to as righteous Lot. So as far as Lot's standing, it's not tarnished, but his daughters, right? Are his daughters... Is there anything said about them? I do wonder what Chabad would say if we look at some of the Jewish traditions there, as far as, because I don't think you're going to hear much more conversation about Lot's daughters in the rest of Scripture, that this is just what happened. You don't hear God necessarily say anything about it. Genesis chapter 19, and we go down here to... Let's see. Yeah, so Chabad's going to take that position here. It says, there is no man on earth. They thought that the entire world had been destroyed as in the generation of the flood. So there, basically the thoughts are, that's it. I mean, we're the only ones left alive. And therefore, how else is humanity going to continue? Trying to see if they have much other thoughts here. And they don't have a whole lot of other comments on all this. Nothing that I care to read right now anyways. So, was it seen evil by God? It would not have been acceptable under the law. That would not have been something that would have been permitted. It's often when you think about, for example, Abraham taking a concubine or David taking another wife, it's not presented as God approved of this. It's also not necessarily presented as God despised this. It is, this happened. This is an event that took place. It doesn't specifically say that God had anger towards Lot's daughters. And honestly, and Robert's the one that makes the point here, and I talked about this in my study on it, Ruth was a Moabitess. She was of the daughters of Lot, or she was of the sons of Lot and his daughters. So you can take that as, well, that's just a true thing. That's just a reality. You could read into it maybe a little bit more, and you could say, there is an aspect of Lot's daughters, if you're willing to be a little bit controversial and take a different approach than many do, there is an aspect of Lot's daughters, you could even give them very, very generous leeway and say they remembered the promise that of the seed of woman he would bruise the serpent's head. Well, hey, we're the last women on earth. If we don't have a seed, there won't be anyone to bruise the serpent's head. We've got to do what we've got to do. And therefore, Ruth, who was of Lot and his daughter's lineage, is a part of the Messianic lineage. You could make that argument. And the truth is, if you made that argument, you'd be showing more biblical study and knowledge than a vast majority of people. So I don't know that it's presented specifically as evil by God. It's something that happened. And if anything, it was extreme circumstances. Did they do so potentially out of ignorance? Yes, they did. But God allowed Ruth, who was a Moabitess of that lineage, to be a part of the Messianic line. So I think that's a good way to consider all the different angles there. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions today? Y'all been a little bit quiet. I don't know if my conversation has been making you think. You're chewing on some of this. Maybe I've made some of you mad and now you don't want to listen to me anymore. I don't think that's true. I've held my numbers decently consistent. So you're watching. You're watching and you're thinking, I suppose. Or you're busy doing something else, like driving or feeding grandchildren or trying to do something like that. Once again, it goes back to the evil of the Democrat Party. Once again, we lose subscribers on a daily basis here on this channel. So make sure you're subscribed. Please share this with people because we're not YouTube's favorite channel, that's for sure. But it just shows the evil of the Democrats because we, in a very short amount of time, have made the clear biblical argument that eliminates the vast, 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 vast majority of all abortions. I mean, you could just solve it almost instantly. And then you're left with this very small number of some more difficult ethical issues that have largely been created by modern science. They really have. Modern science has created a lot of our problems. Knowledge is power. Sometimes knowledge is to our downfall, right? It really almost is the idea of, the old Garth Brooks song, I'm glad I didn't know. I'm glad I didn't know how it all turned out. Well, now, due to some technology, we're kind of able to know beforehand to some degree, right? The direction that this is heading. And it leads to making potentially some bad decisions along the way. And maybe we would have been better off not knowing. Any other thoughts or conversation before I cut y'all loose today? We certainly had a heavier Theology Thursday. We'll have to do something light tomorrow. Appreciate all y'all joining us, Ken and Tom, and of course we got Toby and my mom and Paul. Chandler, always appreciate you. I don't see Luke today. Luke has not been with us. I don't know what Luke is doing. Luke Mirabo, however you pronounce his name, pastor out of South Dakota. I will remind you that we are getting ready for our Bible conference, the 2026 Spring Bible Conference, addressing doctrinal issues that churches avoid, March 27th through the 29th. Mark Baze Ministries at Blue Baptist Church. That will be a good time. We are going to have pizza for you Friday night. Try to have some other fun stuff for you as well. It's things I got to work on. Like a Bible conference, I've got to do a lot of prep today. Okay. Well, I do appreciate y'all. I do want to hear your thoughts. If there's something that you hear me say that concerns you, that bothers you, let Ken or Rick or anybody else testify that I'm ready to hear your thoughts and opinions. And I have been wrong before. I'm more than happy to be wrong again. And so I hope that that's all of our mentality, that we are willing and ready to have a conversation and be willing to have our mind changed on something. I certainly am. So please don't think that I am, I've said and done and not willing to have any more conversations on any of these matters, whether it's the justification or I think the unjustified case of abortion as we define it, or as I would view it, define it, or Revelation chapter 20 and the great white throne judgment, or Lot's daughters, all those fun things, and that is what we try to do here at Mark Baze Ministries on Theology Thursday. We try to do it every day. Friday, tomorrow, we'll be going live. I'm not sure what we'll be talking about. I don't know if it'll be war with Iran or other fun conspiracy theories. Epstein, who knows? Epstein may be back in there, or we'll be talking about theology again. Maybe I'll be needing to readdress what we talked about today. Just appreciate you. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any thoughts, any questions at all. This has been Shields and Arrows, and today is Theology Thursday, where we answer your theology questions. At least you get to hear my thoughts on it. So I appreciate all of you. Have a great rest of your day.